some things are just so obvious that they just don't require signs. You know what I mean? Ski in the winter. Of course you ski in the winter. Not in the summertime. Anyway, it's the same thing. We can figure this out. It's pretty simple. The signs are all there. And the answer is this. You put the microbes back again. Simple as that. And there's really easy ways to do it. The first way is you can use compost. The second way is you can use compost tea, both of which can be made fungally dominated or bacterially dominated. Or you can use mulches, which can be either fungally attractive or bacterially attractive, or you can use endo in the right situations and ectomycorrhizal fungi. So very quickly I'm going to go through these. Let's see. In Seattle, you have to compost. If you don't compost, you got to move to Portland or someplace else. Simple as that. And the reason compost is so good is because it contains, as I said before, the bacteria and the nematodes, which are the fertilizer bags and the fertilizer spreaders, the protozoa and the nematodes, and the fungi, Simple as that. Oh, I got that all mixed up, but you get the point. That's why compost is so good. It's got all of the soil food web base there, and then probably more. It's got the worms and all these terrific things. You just need a little teeny bit of it. You put just 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch down on the ground, and in about 8 months, 6 months, its microbiology is 18 inches down into the soil. Now, there are some problems with compost. One is you've got to have a spouse that's willing to turn the pile. That's kind of basic. My wife hates this picture. She thinks people are going to recognize her. If you have a big place, a big farm, you got to use a lot of compost, and you have to know where your compost comes from. Simple as that. If the horse from the farmer that you get your manure from is using the wrong kind of herbicide, when you use the compost, your nightshade plants aren't going to do very well. Tomatoes, potatoes, they're just not going to grow well because the pesticide is still in the compost even though it's gone through the composting process. Tetracycline, if it's not good compost, will still be in whatever you bought. So you got to know where it comes from if you don't make it yourself. Worm or vermicompost, again, we've mentioned this. This is why it's so good. It's so highly concentrated in goodies. Wow, terrific stuff. And they make it for you. A pound of worms will take a pound of food wastes and convert them every single day. For about 4 months, we had a worm bin in my living room until my wife found out that's what it was. Now it's just off the living room in the greenhouse, and she's the biggest user of it, I have to add. And when you use compost, your gardens are spectacular because there's the diversity and the numbers to keep almost every single thing in check in your garden. The best gardeners in the world are compost gardeners. And wow, it's so sustainable. It makes so much sense. All right, so compost is terrific. Again, you can make it fungally dominated or bacterially dominated by putting in slightly different amounts of brown versus green. But it doesn't stick to leaves. So what we've come up with is something called compost tea. Somewhat controversial. I don't really know why. I've been using it for years and years and years. There are lots of different compost tea makers. Compost tea, you take the compost, you put it into water, you add energy. Remember, you got to really brush hard to get that. And the energy happens to be air bubbles, and they strip out, or water current, they strip out the fungi and the bacteria and the nematodes and the protozoa, and you add foods to it to feed them. And if you want bacterially dominated, one kind of food, and if you want fungally dominated, another kind of food. And after 24 to 48 hours, you have a brew of soil food web microbes that you can use in your yard and garden or farm. Simple as that. Very easy. You can buy your own compost tea in Anchorage, Alaska, and lots of other places where they're starting to use it. New York, Oregon, Washington, California. It's moving throughout the country. Or you make your own, or you can do something called compost extracting, where you take the compost and you put it into a bag, a cheesecloth, and you knead it for 15 minutes in water. Now, you're not multiplying the bacteria and the fungi, but you're stripping them out, and it works pretty darn good. So you can use that as well, and you can spray it on the leaves, and what happens is it outcompetes the bad guys for space, for food, and for location. So you cover the stomata. You outcompete the bad guys. It's not an icide, it's an outcompeter. Does it work? Very controversial. Here's some before and after pictures. And the reason why it's controversial is because it's hard to duplicate compost and compost tea, et cetera, et cetera. This is South Africa. Compost tea, no compost tea. If you look in the back there, that's Dr. Elaine Ingham's old office. You can see where the compost tea was not used. These are the roses at the Shed Aquarium a couple of years ago where they were experimenting, and those are potatoes from potato land someplace. But this is one of my favorite pictures. This is John Evans and his wife Mary. He has about 17 Guinness Book of Records, and he grows big cabbages and big vegetables. And the reason why I show this picture is he's a soil food webby big time. That's all he uses, compost and compost tea. That's a 27-pound leek. If you look over here at the zucchini, that particular zucchini weighed, I think, 49 pounds. And I took it down to the Seattle Northwest Flower and Garden Show from Anchorage. And of course, I flew Alaska Airlines because I'm loyal to my airline, and they only allow 50 pounds per bag. So I had to have his own bag. So when I got it to this show, I opened up the bag, and there is the little TSA card. We've been through your luggage, blah, blah, blah. And stapled to it was a little note that said, "Holy shit." Don't mean to offend. That's a pretty big zucchini. When I cut it open, it was as beautiful as you can possibly imagine. Unreal. Absolutely incredible. This is the capper, however. Because there's a lady up in Washington State who really hates compost tea and claims that we're all charlatans and everything else. This is a guy named Lee Fleischer in the beret over there on the right, talking to a woman named Faust, who happens to be president of Harvard University. They're looking at a compost tea machine that was just purchased by Harvard University, one of several that they now own. And T. Fleischer did his thesis up there, a master's thesis on compost tea using Harvard Yard. And today, it was so successful, when you park your car in Harvard Yard, you're parking your car on a compost tea yard. And in fact, it was so successful that Harvard instituted a campus-wide, worldwide campus-wide composting program in order to be able to feed their composting machines. Because what you really want to use is indigenous stuff if you can. You take healthy microbes from your own area and you use them right in your own area. And so Harvard uses compost tea. So does the University of Colorado, New York Botanical Gardens, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's absolutely spectacular stuff, and I highly, highly recommend it. Now, you can also use mulches. And again, some mulches are bacterial attractants and some are fungal attractants. If they're green, they are bacterial. Straw is green. It's got a lot of sugars on it, incidentally, and coated with paramecium, which I'll talk about in a second. And brown tend to be fungal. Fungi break down the brown stuff. So it's real easy. And what falls down from a plant's supposed to stay on the ground. Now, we come along and we pick up fruits and we pick up leaves, because I don't know why we pick up leaves, but we do. And we shouldn't, because this is how plants feed themselves. There are no bare soils in nature. So there was a question this morning about mulches. Of course you should be using mulch, because that's what nature does. And if you use green mulches, you get nitrates. And if you use brown mulches, you get ammoniums. And you can feed the plants what they need.